What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Now I'm doing something a little bit different today. As you can see, we've got a tier system. As you can see, we've got some Spider-Man games, and that's right, I love me some Spider-Man, and I've been playing Spider-Man games for pretty much 20 years now at this point. So what am I going to do today is I'm going to rank every mainstream Spider-Man game on a 5-tier system. I'm going to be starting at the PlayStation 1 generation of console, go all the way to PlayStation 5. I'm going to share with you what I think about each game, how much I love them, do I love them, are they great games? Because Spider-Man, like a lot of long-running series, has had some pretty awesome games. He's also had some proper stinkers, and there's quite a few in this list. Some of these games you probably haven't heard of, some of these games you probably haven't played. I have played all of these games but one. The only one I haven't played is going to be Miles Morales, which will be, you might not be able to see it right now because I've aligned them in order they released, I think, anyway, off the top of my head. I haven't played Miles Morales. I know I'm going to enjoy that game, and I'm still going to talk about it a little bit, but I just haven't got a PS5 yet, guys, as some of you may already know, because nobody's got one because those damn scalpers. Now, before I begin with the list, I want to give a little bit of a shout out to CARLOHAZ. He actually sort of inspired this video because he did a video on ranking the PlayStation 4 exclusives, kind of like this, and I saw it and I thought I want to do that with Spider-Man games. So thank you, CARLOHAZ. I'll put a link down to his channel down below if you want to check out his content. And alright, so I'm going to go through all these games. So we have 14 games in this video. Now, it's worth addressing, I'm only talking about games that came out on the PlayStation 1, 2, 3 or 4. Some of them came out on the Xbox, some came out on the Xbox 360 as well. And some came out on the Nintendo DS. I'm not talking about the DS games because they weren't very good, most of them, and it's nothing against Nintendo, but you know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, the handhelds were never as powerful as their counterparts for the consoles. So you know, the Nintendo Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Flip, DS, that was nowhere near as powerful as a PS2 or a PlayStation 3. I mean, that's common sense. So because of that, they had to just change all the games, and pretty much all of the Spider-Man games just ended up being these really crappy side-scrolling games. That was like the generation that Nintendo 3DSs did. Yes, Nintendo's got amazing first-party games like Zelda, Pokemon, Mario, but when they try to take the big developer games and make them their own, they always end up just being, as I said, crappy side-scrollers. So, but now, you know, they've got the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch is an incredible console, so I'm not bashing that, and you know, now they can make as good games, but there was a time when they just weren't that good. So because of that, I've excluded them from this list. And we're going to go back, so we're going to go all the way back, I believe 21 years ago. And as you can see, the first game on our list is Spider-Man for the PlayStation 1. Now, I played this game when I was about 7 or 8. It is a great game, but before we go any further, I should probably explain the ranking system. So we've got 5 tiers. Masterpiece. These games are not only amazing Spider-Man games, they're also amazing games. So pretty much anybody will enjoy these games, not just Spider-Man fans. We've then got a little bit down, the next one is must play for Spidey fans. Now this tier is maybe games that are maybe solid 7 or 8 out of 10s, but if you're a Spidey fan, it's pretty much a 9 or a 10, you'll still love the game so much. We've then got average, you know, there's games that are probably 5, 6 out of 10. Even Spidey fans are going to find them tedious and difficult to play. We've then got meh, just dumpster fires, not very good games. Then we've got terrible, games that are just shocking. There's not many shocking Spider-Man games, to be honest, but he does have his fair share. Going back, so Spider-Man, the first game. Now, this game had the late Stan Lee as in the opening credits. This game was the first Spider-Man game on the PlayStation 1. It was, you know, limited by its time, but it had a lot of cool things. It had a unique story, it had its own unique villains. Now, guys, are going to be spoilers in these videos, but all of these games are like, most of them are like longer than 10 years old, so prepare yourself. But you know, they made their own villain in Carnage Doc Ock, and it was a great scene where you had to run away from him. It was a cool little, like, you know, web combat. It was limited by its time, but I think it delivered a great story, had some fun costumes, a bit of humour in there. For me, it's a must play for Spidey fans. I just want to say, guys, as well, I'm riffing this. This is freestyle, so I mean, it's hard to say because at the time it was really good, it was revolutionary. Looking back now, if you were to go back and play a PlayStation 1 game, it's going to be one of the best ones, but there probably is better PS1 games that I can't really think of. So because of that, Spider-Man is going in there must play for Spidey fans. Okay, on that, next we've got Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro. So on the PlayStation 1, this game was a sequel, obviously, and I just want to say, I didn't find this one that left as much of an impression on me. So I'm going off memory. I haven't done much research on these games. I've played, as I said, all of these games. Some of these games I can still remember very fresh, even though I played them 15 years ago. This isn't one of those games. It would have been more of the same from the Spider-Man PlayStation 1 game, a little bit more extended. It just clearly didn't have that much of an impression on me. So because of that, I'm just going to give it the rating of average. Okay, now we're talking. So next we've got SpiderMan The Movie for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. This game firstly had the voice acting of the legendary Tugboat Toby. It had kind of like open world environments, it had lots of different villains, it had a pretty good story, and there was also like unlockables where you could like play as Green Goblin and all these little things. I really enjoyed this game. Now, if memory serves me right, it had the basic Spider-Man combat system. You know, you had your web shield, like, you know, the web like dome you could make. It was the old Spider-Man games, guys, were all sort of based around web attacks. Now, bear in mind, just like Spider-Man 1 and 2 for the PlayStation 1, Spider-Man for the PlayStation 2 was not open world, it was level based. And we all know Spider-Man really shines when he gets his open world style. I mean, if you loved the movie, at the time this was a must-play game, and it was a great game back then. Do I think it stands a test of time now? To be honest, no. I think I've got to review these from now, so when I'm talking about these older games, yeah, it's kind of hard because I'm trying to think, well, would you go back and play them? Because guys, honestly, later on in a couple of years, couple of games time, there's some games that are still worth playing now. So because of that, I'm going to give Spider-Man for the PS1, PlayStation 2, a bit of a meh. You know, it was okay. It had some okay villains, had some okay combat, but it didn't really do anything. It just sort of retooled the Spider-Man story of the movie with a few enemies hashed in there and out. No changeable costumes, and to be honest as well, Spider-Man has so many costumes. One of the key things about delivering a Spider-Man game is multiple costumes and multiple skins. Like, it's one of those games. It's one of the franchises where it's like actually like a key thing. Yeah, you know, Batman has the same. There's a lot of other characters which don't necessarily have as many costumes and people aren't that bothered about. But superhero games should have all the different skins, and for that, Spider-Man didn't have that. Other than you could play as a wrestler costume in the new Spider-Man, but no. And I also remember a few levels being a bit stuck in the times. So because of that, I'm actually going to give Spider-Man on the PlayStation 2 a meh score. Meh, probably a 4 or 5 out of 10. Okay, now we've got Spider-Man 2 for the PlayStation 2. Now this game, this isn't an understatement to say that Spider-Man 2 was revolutionary in terms of Spider-Man. It brought us an open world environment where you played as Spider-Man, again voiced by Tobey Maguire, and the city was your playground. You could go everywhere in New York City. You know, it had the web swinging, it had free running, it had everything. It was really, really great, and it just changed the landscape of Spider-Man games going forward. It had a huge part to play in the development of Spider-Man, of the Spider-Man we saw last year, Miles Morales, and we saw in 2018. This game paved the way. Now, should you return to this game? Now, again, going back and me thinking now in today's age, I still don't think it deserves the title of masterpiece, because it tells the story of Spider-Man 2. The combat was a bit iffy, and it was kind of like they built this open playground, which was, I'm not going to underplay it. It was amazing. When I was, I was like 13, maybe I was younger than that. I was probably about 10 when this came out. I remember playing it for hours and hours and just being mesmerised. And that game to me was just the exploring the city. I mean, I do remember that one fight where you fight Mysterio and you run up to him and just uppercut him and end it, and that's the fight done. I think for Spidey fans, you need to play this game. You want to go back and you want to see where it all started, what really kicked off the amazing Spider-Man experience, but I don't think it deserves the title of masterpiece because the story and the combat are still quite average at this point. So I'll pop it there for must play for Spidey fans. Okay guys, next we've got Ultimate Spider-Man. So if you grew up in the early 2000s like I did, the Ultimate Universe, the Marvel Universe, doubled. They were doing the original Earth 616 comic book series for all the characters, but then they also created the Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Marvel series, where they were retelling the classic stories, and it was basically to bring in new readers, to bring in a new audience, so people who have been supporting the superheroes for years and years and years could keep reading about their superheroes. But then for those newcomers like me, when I was like 10, 11, they brought this new one where they retold the Spider-Man story, where you got to read about young Peter Parker, 15-year-old Peter Parker, going back and having all the troubles of being a high school kid even, and also being a superhero. Now this was met with a lot of acclaim and success in the Ultimate Spider-Man. They also redid the Avengers and called them the Ultimates. I don't know much about the other comics. I don't think they were as well received as this Ultimate Spider-Man was, but to be honest, Ultimate Spider-Man was my comic book series. I read that the first 130 or 40 issues of this series. I loved it to death. I loved the artwork. I loved the way Spider-Man looks. I loved all the new takes on all the superheroes. And that's actually where the modern Nick Fury actually has come from. He's come from the Marvel Ultimate Universe, and that's actually where Miles Morales came from as well. But it's all changed now, so don't follow that as... It's all just changed. It's all just crazy. Comics have just gone on a wild tangent. But anyway, along with that came the PlayStation 2 Ultimate Spider-Man game, and this game followed pretty much like issues like 25 to issues like 80, where basically the symbiote comes in for the first time, and it's a bit different. So rather than being an alien suit, actually Peter Parker's dad and Eddie Brock's dad actually created this black symbiote, this suit to actually like heal disease, and it was made to like heal like cancer and stuff. And it ended up being the super-powered suit, which turned people into monsters. And this game starts out where Peter has the suit and he loses it, and then Eddie Brock becomes Venom. And that just segues into this game. This game is open world, alright? This game kept the cartoony graphics. It had the Human Torch in it. It had loads of other cool superheroes in it. Had loads of villains in it. Had a really cool Green Goblin. But also, it had Venom as a playable character in the open world. And the first level of Venom, you fight Wolverine. Alright, this game, if you couldn't already tell, was fantastic. I loved this game. It had better web mechanics than Spider-Man 2. I think it came out 2 years, or maybe only a year later. Its web design, not only could you go to New York, you could also go to Queens as well. And it had some of the best. I think it was better, much more refined, fun web swinging with a really great story. And that's what Spider-Man 2 didn't have. It had a generic movie tie-in story, whereas this game followed the comics. You're fighting Rhino, Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, Venom couple times, and it was immense. It was great, and because of that, this game deserves to be the masterpiece. This is the first game I've spoke about, which if you were to play today, you would still think is a great Spider-Man game. These games, the first 4 I've mentioned, all have kind of failed the test of time. They haven't stood against it. Ultimate Spider-Man, because for one, it's got its cartoony graphics. I would love, love, love to see this game get remastered. I think it would be absolutely amazing. But even if it didn't. You could play this game on a PlayStation 2 now and be blown away at how good and how fun it still is. Okay guys, so here's when things get a little bit confusing. The next 2 games, I'm not entirely sure when they came out. I think they both, Spider-Man Friend of Foe and Spider-Man 3, both came out about 2007. So I'm going to talk about Friend of Foe first. Friend of Foe is weird. It's a weird game. So firstly, the guy who voiced Ratchet from Ratchet & Clank, he voices Spider-Man. And it's sort of set like, it has the movie vibes, so Spider-Man looks like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and he has New Goblin in it, but then that's as far as it goes, and it's basically like they get attacked by aliens that like teleport and manipulate and take over all Spider-Man's bad guys and all his enemies, and it's about kind of like how he frees his enemies and then they all become his foes. And if you think kind of like it's a 2-player drop-in, drop-out co-op game where you just make your way through levels like beat-em-up style, like an over-the-top kind of way, kind of like Marvel's Ultimate Alliance or X-Men Legends, or kind of like Star Wars Lego is probably the better example of it. The only cool thing is halfway through the game you get like the black suit. I remember that being pretty cool. But it's kind of, it's not, it was built for kids. Like, all these other 5 games, they were like built just for video games. They were just for people who love games or people who were getting into the gaming in the world. But Spider-Man Friend of Foe was the first game which felt really tailored for kids. I played it as a kid, like 14, 15. I was younger than that. I was about 14. And even at 14, I thought this game's kind of rubbish. So because of that, I'm going to give Friend of Foe, it's going to land itself firmly in the meh category. It's kind of a weird premise, guys. If you played it today, you'd be wondering, like, what is this game? Like, it's kind of, a kid might enjoy it, but, I'm a grown man who likes Spider-Man. I ain't going to enjoy that stuff. Okay, next we have Spider-Man 3, the movie tie-in game. Again, Toby Tugboat returned to voice this character and this game, and I really like this one. So I really enjoyed this Spider-Man game. For me, it was the first one which I was starting to get into what made it good and what makes bad games. I was really starting to understand video games a lot more, and I loved the web swinging. The web swinging was really, really refined. The combat again was a bit meh. It had the same problems that Spider-Man 2 had. It felt like really like janky. There's no like dodge mechanic. It was just kind of like you got hit. Again, the game shined in its web mechanics, and this game had the symbiote suit, and I remember when you had the symbiote on, you could run like twice as fast, jump twice as high, you had a rage mode which made you do all this damage. And as well, you could also get the DLC, which I never got, to play as New Goblin, which is quite a cool premise, but it was like a pre-order bonus or something ridiculous. Now I remember this game being pretty tough. Maybe not now, but I remember when I fought Kraven. If you've played this game and you remember fighting Kraven, yeah, there was like 3-stage boss battle where you played he was like a dragon, a tiger, then a bird, then a lizard or something, and he was tough. This game was, it had all the gangs and stuff, and it was okay for me. I remember thinking it looked really good. I've since looked back and thought it looked okay. I don't think it's as good as Spider-Man 2. I think it doesn't build enough on Spider-Man 2, and the only reason why Spider-Man 2 is a must-play is because it established the amazing web swinging. But for me, Spider-Man 3 is firmly in the average. I think you could probably miss it. It's kind of good to have this story retold. You know, the story of Spider-Man 3 with Venom and Sandman. You know, it was back when the movie tie-ins literally were movie tie-ins. They were literally just fleshed out versions of movies. So basically, rather than having a 2.5 hour experience, you get like a 12-hour story, but so it was okay. Again, it's nothing worldy. It's not as good as Ultimate Spider-Man. I don't think it's a must-play. It lands bang on in the average category. Okay, next up is... I've thought about these games a lot as I've been preparing for this video, and you know, I've said a lot of my podcasts and stuff that Spider-Man 2018 is my joint top 2 games of all time. I'm not sure if it's my actual favourite Spider-Man. I think it must be it's either joint top or just edges Spider-Man Web of Shadows. So Spider-Man Web of Shadows to me is, for its time, was one of the best games that ever came out around 2008. It came out in 2008. You played obviously Spider-Man, but not only did you play Spider-Man, it was actually about a symbiote invasion that took over New York. And there's 3 phases of the game. You're just fighting gangs, and then basically people start going crazy, and then people turn into symbiotes. And then stage 3 happens, and literally everybody's a symbiote. It's an entire symbiote invasion of New York. Obviously Venom is behind it all. There's Luke Cage, there's Moon Knight, Wolverine, Vulture. There's all these characters in it, and you can summon them all. So if you choose the good options, you can summon Wolverine to help you at any time. If you choose the bad options, you can get Rhino or Vulture. It's pretty cool. There's multiple endings. There's 2 good endings, 2 bad endings. And the coolest thing of those 2 things that are amazing for this game. Firstly, you could, at the click of a button, you could turn into a symbiote Spider-Man. Literally, you'd be swinging halfway through a web, you'd be halfway through a jump, turn into symbiote Spider-Man. And the combat changed. Symbiote Spider-Man could throw cars, he could hit harder, jump faster, whereas Red Spider-Man, original Spider-Man, was more web-based, a little bit faster. And it was just such a good dynamic. And then towards the end of the game, depending on your good or bad decisions, you either get stuck with the symbiote or stuck with the red suit. The symbiote was miles better, and that's kind of the decision you have to make. Do you want to choose the more powerful suit and be more powerful, but in the end, people die for it, you lose people? Or do you want to make the good choice? It's actually the harder choice because the game is harder for it, but you do the right thing. That's a Spider-Man game. Spider-Man game is making you make those decisions. It's crazy. And as well, this game had some of the best Spider-Man combat I've ever played. It kind of had this lock-on where you could bounce between enemies, fight on walls, fight on the ground. It was just great, and because of that, if you can't already tell, this is an absolute masterpiece. A 10 out of 10 this game. Ultimate Spider-Man might have been a 9 out of 10, but Spider-Man Web of Shadows, for me, is one of the best games I've ever played. I'm not even kidding. It's in my top 10 of games of all time, and I love it a bit, and it's definitely a masterpiece. Everybody who, not only if you love a Spider-Man game or you love this game, if you just love games, you can appreciate how good this game is. Alrighty, we are more than halfway. We've talked about 8 now. Now, this is when Beanox Studios took over the IP Spider-Man, and they made, I believe, 4 games. Shattered Dimensions, Edge of Time, Amazing Spider-Man, and Amazing Spider-Man 2. So the first one that came out was Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, I believe in 2010. Now this game, it was about Mysterio shatters the Tablet of Time, which is just kind of being held in this random museum. It kind of doesn't really make sense. If it was that important, it would be heavily guarded, but regardless, Stan Lee's back, giving you an absolutely amazing introduction and commentary throughout the game. And basically, Mysterio shatters the Tablet of Time, and you have to play as 4 different Spider-Men. Spider-Man from the original, 616 Earth, Spider-Man 2099 from the future, Ultimate Spider-Man, again my boy, but with a symbiote suit on. And then finally, Spider-Man Noir, the character, the Spider-Man from the 1940s, who doesn't have a spider sense. He doesn't. I think he can spin webs, and that's pretty much it. And it's so each character gets 3 levels, so there's 12 levels in total, and the final boss. And each level's based on a villain. So, for example, the first Spider-Man level's based on Kraven. So Kraven has the tablet, and you have to fight Kraven, then fight all these minions, and then fight Kraven again. Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man has Deadpool for one, which is voiced by Nolan North, I think, where you fight, you're on Deadpool Island. He's like made a TV show, and you're like the guest, and you're trying to find Deadpool. It's a really creative game, and because there's 4 Spider-Man, it introduces 4 different mechanics. Like Spider-Man Noir is all stealth. You have to play the entire game stealth. Spider-Man 29 is really fast-paced. He's actually probably the most boring character. Spider-Man 616, the original, uses all these different cool web attacks. And finally, Ultimate Spider-Man has all these symbiote cool attacks. Each character has 3 or 4 skins. It's a pretty good game. I platinumed this last year. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's not a masterpiece, but it's definitely like a 7 or 8 out of 10. So for that, I'm giving Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions a must-play for Spidey fans. Okay, now we're going to have a bit of a downward spiral in the quality of games, I'm afraid. Next we have Spider-Man Edge of Time. Now, I haven't played this game for 10 years. It came out in 2011, and it's kind of like a sequel to Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. Basically, there's like a time rift in the 2 worlds. Spider-Man Original and Spider-Man 2099 end up merging, and Spider-Man actually, it's a spoiler, but it's kind of the first 10 minutes. Spider-Man actually dies, and because he dies, Spider-Man 2099's universe completely changes, and it's all about Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom comes in and he's got this power where if Spider-Man's around him, he becomes really, really weak, and he ends up dying, and then basically Spider-Man 2099's got to kind of like save him and take him to the future. So that means Spider-Man of the past's in the future and Spider-Man of the future's in the past. It's a little bit of a confusing premise, but it kind of takes what Shattered Dimensions had of its 4 Spider-Man and cuts it in half. So rather than having 4 Spider-Man of different combat systems, you pretty much have the worst Spider-Man being Spider-Man 2099 in terms of combat. He's a good character, but you have him, and then you have Spider-Man from normal, and you pretty much taken the 2 weakest combat styles from the Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions and made a game around it, and it just doesn't really work. You spend all your time pretty much just running around corridors of a building, and it's all about how like the company Alchemax, which is the big company in the future, it's kind of like how it's all set in this one building, and it's kind of like all the changes that happen in the future affect the past and all this stuff, and it's just rubbish. It just doesn't work. It's kind of like people will really critique when you're stuck in corridors, you're fighting in like offices, or like it's just, the generic Star Wars complaint where you go into Star Wars and just corridor after corridor of like metal. That's what this game pretty much is, and there's a cool twist at the end when you reveal who the final villain is, but yeah, it's really, really underwhelming. It's not the best game, to be honest. It just, for me, it's actually not even as good as Spider-Man Enter Electro or Spider-Man 3. I think most people will probably, I'm going to replay this game again, so I might have my opinion change this year. It's definitely on my backlog, because I've got the game up there. But for me, it's just my memories of it are that it's just a much worse version of Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. Like, if you were to play one of the games on PS3, I would say Web of Shadows and then Shattered Dimensions, and that's probably it. So on that, Spider-Man Edge of Time is actually getting the I can't decide if it's gonna get the average. I might give him the average. I'm gonna give it the average because it's still Spider-Man. I think it's like, it'd be okay. It's a short game. It's 10 hours. I'm struggling with this one probably the most of every game I've looked at, to be honest, because it's just very shallow. So yeah, it's getting the meh treatment, guys. It is getting the meh treatment. I'm sorry. It's very forgettable and it's very repetitive. And we've seen some Spider-Man games of late which have shown that Spider-Man isn't repetitive. He has potential to be a very diverse character, very diverse gaming character, which brings in lots of different gaming mechanics, stealth, exploration, storytelling. This game is just literally like section to section of combat, and that's when Spider-Man games, or most games in my opinion, fail, is when they just do one game style for the whole game. Look at like Naughty Dog and stuff. They do a lot of great games and they break up their combat sections with climbing, with parkour, with storytelling, exploration. This is the thing about Edge of Time that I remember is literally just combat after combat after combat, and the problem is the combat is so stale. So yeah, sorry Edge of Time. You're staying in the meh category. Alright, now we're really going to the pile of crap. Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 were both made by Beanox again. So I should say as well, Edge of Time and Shattered Dimensions both don't have open worlds, which is another reason why they ain't that great. So they brought back the open world for Amazing Spider-Man. So this came out in 2012, alongside Andrew Garfield, Amazing Spider-Man. I think that's an okay film. It's an okay film. It's an okay. Andy Garfield is a great Spider-Man. He's a great actor. This game came out. It kind of went from. It's actually a sequel to the Amazing Spider-Man. So it's set after the Amazing Spider-Man, and it's kind of like it's about basically like the guy Lizard, how he's like this mutant, isn't he? It's kind of like how they release and then they end up creating all Spider-Man's villains as mutants, rather than like, you know, Rhino being in a techno suit. Rhino actually is a mutant Rhino, and Scorpion's a mutant Scorpion. And you know, it's not a great game. You know, it's kind of like, it's a big step backwards in terms of free roam Spider-Man games. So when I've just sang the praise of Ultimate Spider-Man and Spider-Man Web of Shadows, it's crazy to see how a company can get open world web swinging so wrong. And Beanox Studios unfortunately showed with Spider-Man 1 and 2 that they had not a clue how to make an open world Spider-Man game. It just felt so rigid and so like swing. And a lot of people criticise, like, you know, in Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man Web of Shadows, your webs stuck to buildings like the new Spider-Man games. Now that, I mean, that's a cool thing, but it was never an issue with me. But the problem is, it's just, again, it was like lack of care of detail for this game. It was a rushed out movie tie-in, that's what it was. And because of that, you know, yes, this game had some costumes, but it's, you know, it does as well. Batman Arkham Asylum had come out between Edge of Time and Amazing Spider-Man, and you know, Arkham Asylum is a brilliant game, and what I think we need to understand is that it actually revolutionized a lot of combat styles. So they introduced the free flow combat, which is like, you know, squares attack, triangles block, or dodge. And Amazing Spider-Man did that, and they just did it really, really poorly. It was kind of just a very lackluster game. In fact, really bad. So in fact, Amazing Spider-Man is our first terrible game. And things actually got worse in Amazing Spider-Man 2 in my opinion. So in 2014, another movie tie-in game came out. This must have been around about the time when movie tie-in games really started to suck ass. We had 2009 and onwards, you know, we had like the 4 game, we had the Iron Man 2 game. We had a lot of movie tie-in games that weren't always just Marvel. You know, there was hundreds, I just can't think of them at this current time. So Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, and I will give it this, it had really cool suits, but it had this terrible sort of like story with like Kraven the Hunter and Carnage, and just it was just more of the same, just underwhelming trash. And for that, again, they still didn't get the free-flowing right. And you know what? This one actually hurts me quite a lot, because I remember in 2014, how old would I have been? 20? 21, maybe? Yeah. I remember watching footage going, this game could be good. We're going to get another Web of Shadows. We're going to get another Web of Shadows. I'm so excited. And I remember playing it thinking, this game is just terrible. So if you're an Xbox One owner and you really have watched the Spider-Man game and thought, like 2018, and thought, oh, I just want to play a Spider-Man game, just buy a PS4. Don't buy Amazing Spider-Man 2. It is a total dumpster fire. So because of that, again, it's landing firmly in the terrible section. Okay guys, so we've got 2 games left. We've got Marvel Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales 2020. Now, it's no understatement to say that Marvel Spider-Man is, as I've already said, it's in my top drawn favourite game of all time. Like, it's up there. It was like, I think it's drawn with Skyrim for my favourite game of all time. Maybe drawn with Web of Shadows. I don't know, but regardless, this game took everything that we loved in a Spider-Man game and just made them absolutely amazing. Obviously, it had the 2018, it had the PlayStation 4 power behind it, so not only did it make a really beautiful graphic, a very appealing graphical game to look at, it also had a very in-depth system. It had pretty good combat. Again, it was that free flow combat, but it worked really well. It had a lot of gadgets. Spider-Man had all these tools at his hands. Had some stealth sections which were pretty good. But for me, the web swinging was just absolutely phenomenal. Like, I'm a trophy hunter, guys, so if you watch my content, you know I love collecting trophies. This is one of the only games that I turn on every couple of months and just play for a couple of hours, because I just love exploring the world. And I remember when I played this game for the first time, I remember just sitting down and going, this is the game. This is like the best game I've ever played. Like, I've never felt such euphoria from just turning on the game and just swinging through the city. And for that, like I've said, this game is a total masterpiece. Like, it is the best Spider-Man game. If you're only going to play one game, it should be this one. But then I would then encourage the other masterpieces as well. But this game just shows not only how great some developers are. Insomniac, you are literally my favourite developer of all time now. But also, like, how if you have the Spider-Man IP, you have the potential to make one of the best. You can make the best games of all time. You know, I think we've seen that actually having the best IPs doesn't mean you're going to make the best games. EA had Star Wars for like 6 years. Square Enix had the Avengers, and they both made rubbish games. Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2. Yeah, Battlefront 2 might be a bit better 3 years after launch, but it was a really bad game at launch, and so was Avengers. Avengers is an absolute pile of garbage. Like, I would never tell anybody to play Marvel's Avengers. If you want to play an Avengers game, buy Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 for the Nintendo DS, or buy Marvel vs. Capcom for the Xbox 360 or Xbox One or PS4, or buy like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 or 3 for the PlayStation 3. Do not buy Marvel's Avengers. It is a steaming pile of utter garbage. But anyway, that shows how you can butcher IP. Having the IP isn't enough. And I think that's what this list shows. It shows that like there's some really good Spider-Man games, but there's also actually really there's 6 games out of 14 that are really good. And that's going to bring on to my final topic, which is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now I'm not going to beat around the bush for this one. I haven't played this one. I've seen enough about it. The only problem with this game is the fact that it's too short. But it is made by Insomniac, and it is kind of like a 1.5 sequel to Marvel Spider-Man 2018. So for that, I'm just putting it straight in Masterpiece. I know for a fact this game is a game that I know I will love, and if I love Marvel Spider-Man, yeah, do you know what, Miles Morales might be a shorter game coming in at like 8 hours, but that doesn't take away that they've refined the open world exploration, which as a Spidey fan, that is pretty much the most important thing. It's the one thing that Spider-Man has that there's no other game like it that can match Spider-Man because of his exploration and his parkour. So as long as you get that right, you're on track to make one of the best Spider-Man games of all time. So I'm putting Spider-Man Miles Morales up there. You may or may not agree if you played it, but you know, this is my list. You know, it's going to be biased, but I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and this is the whole point. Masterpiece is a game where if you're a Spidey fan, you're going to think it's 10 out of 10, but also if you're a normal gamer, you're going to think it's a great game. Yes, people will criticize Spider-Man and Miles Morales for like having a few, you know, open world tropes like, you know, viewpoints and like side missions and like crimes and stuff, but the thing is, though, that is because it's a AAA game. AAA open world games unfortunately all follow the same formula, but I would rather have a Spider-Man game following an open world formula than a level based Spider-Man game like, you know, Shattered Dimensions or Edge of Time. Yes, Shattered Dimensions was good, and it's still a good game for most players, will still enjoy it, Spidey fans will still love it, but Edge of Time has shown that it can be an absolute dumpster fire. Now, as I wanted to say, there's 14 games on this list, 4 of which are classing as masterpieces, 3 are must-plays for Spidey fans. We've then got 7 games in the average, meh, and terrible. So it just shows that, again, in my opinion, it's a very mixed bag with the Spider-Man. You've got 7 really strong games, you've then got 2 okay games, and then you've got 5 really, really bad games. So Spider-Man has had his fair share of gaming ups and downs, like lots of long-running games. Like, there's a lot of games out there that have had really great games and really bad ones. Remember, like Gears of War Redemption? Is that what it was called? I can't remember. That spin-off with, like, you know, there's been bad games out there. But yeah, I think Spider-Man's now, we're at the point where 2018, 2021 now, that Spider-Man's going up. He's going forward, you know, and Insomniac are hopefully going to release a Spider-Man in maybe the next 2 years, and it's going to be just as good as this one, I really hope. And that's all for this one, guys. I've spoke for quite a while at the camera by myself. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this new style of video. If you like these videos and you want to see more of them, let me know down below. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link my tier system that I've made in the comments down below, and you can fill it out in your own order and take a screenshot and put it in my Discord. I'll make a channel for it and you can share it there, and I'll see how you rank these games. Yes, if you haven't played them, that's fair enough, but if you have played all of them like me, if you're getting a bit old now, then you played most of these games. I would love to know what you think of these. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this style of video and you want me to do more of these sort of tier ranking systems, let me know down below. Let me know some comments of ideas that you'd like to see, you know, maybe topics. Maybe, like, I'm thinking of things like, you know, Star Wars games ranked, Star Wars movies ranked, you know, maybe some Platinum Trophy games ranked, all that sort of stuff. You know, I'm just playing the field, okay? Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take it easy.